So welcome everyone. Theo Forde here with Nexus for Change and the doctoral program in organization development and change at Bowling Green State University. I am honored and blessed and grateful to be in the company of all of you, but particularly to have here today Yeshim Harris, Francis Baldwin, and Hilary Bradbury, who are going to share with us some of their insights, their individual and personal passions and thought leadership, and how those might connect and provide some value in how we think about this thing that many of us, I think, pursue in one way or another in terms of getting synergy and doing more together than we could do on our own. And the three have had some opportunity to chat. It's interesting to me. This is their first time meeting in this sort of virtual space, and they've agreed to introduce one another and get us started. So I'm going to, Hilary, toss it to you to introduce our first panelist.
Yeah, I'm very happy to do that. And maybe we'll pin Francis while I introduce her.
Absolutely.
And just a very quick anecdote. I mentioned I had not ever met Francis in person. So what I'm sharing is from gleaning from her background. But I honestly feel that Francis has already shown me over email how to organize a group, how to get going with teamwork. You know, she was the one who suggested how we might all bring things together. And I just thought, you know, that really just shows who she is. She is principal consultant and wisdom keeper with Designed Wisdom. That's a consultancy based in Georgia. To which Francis brings her many years of national and international experience. In this time, she has worked with all types of systems, from the military to public agencies to corporations. Her work very much integrates the roles of coach and mentor. She's also executive in residence here at your doctoral program at Bowling Green. Francis is recipient of Lifetime Achievement Award from the national organization OD Network, and her primary interests are cultivating presence. So take a moment with that. Presence as an essential competency for change professionals. She's particularly interested in women's leadership, and I noticed in her keynote symposium in Seoul, she speaks of the role of women being improved with men. So it's very whole systems orientation, given her Gestalt background. It would be undoubtedly a rich experience to work with Francis, but more importantly, perhaps I suspect it would be great fun. Over to you, Francis. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It would be fun. And I'm glad reading Cultivating Presence stopped Hilary, but that's another story. So good morning, everyone. So the how-to that I want to introduce today is, how do we use the space between us? How do we use the space between us to cultivate collaborative synergy and collaboration? So those of you who know me, I have to have a story. I'm going to tell you a quick story, and then I want to pull out the principles that I think relate to my story as well as to the other stories you're going to hear. So this is a story about when I worked inside of Exxon. I was called as an internal OD consultant. I was called one day to help to work out a conflict between two companies under the corporate umbrella. Exxon Chemical was like a new industry for Exxon. Their product had to be moved to their customers through Exxon pipeline, which is an old conservative part of the organization. So that's the first thing. These organizations were organized years, hundreds of years, 100 years apart almost. And they just had different orientations. And what they wanted me to do is to bring them together and help them to work together. And I had a half day to do this. So in preparation, I went and visited each company, talked with them, and I got this clear distinction. These are really two different worlds. And I knew that until they could see each other, we wouldn't be able to do well with this half day of trying to resolve this issue. So what I designed was a session where first a representative of each company described who they are, what's important to them, especially how they work with customers and what their biggest challenges are. So, of course, the chemical company talked about being in a new competitive environment, needing to stabilize their patents, get new customers, and customer relationship was important to them because in their market, it's whoever's going to be quick to market is going to get the contract. And what the problem they were having is that the way that the pipeline company worked, they were very sluggish and slow, and sometimes the product didn't come through the pipeline when it was supposed to go online. So they were very frustrated. The pipeline company was old and established, had the same customers for many years, and the only customer relationship they had to look at what's happening in the market and what's the speed, volume around which they have to pump the product. But also it was just a good old friends club. We meet once a year, we have a drink, we smoke a few cigars, and this is literally the truth, and talk about what's new and what we have to do. So they had a good relationship. So they were so different. And so I had them to talk about their cultures. And then I said, look at the capacity we have now to work together. And they did come together. They talked about the way things used to be, what they could provide for each other. And some of it was so simple, like testing the lines before, having a structure where they meet, monitor everything, and that the pipeline would make an effort to actually meet the customers and know the customers so that they would have the same relationship as Exxon Chemical. So what happened, I think I want to do I want to just share. Okay, let me see what I want to share. Can you see this?
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is my sort of concept and my theory of generative intelligence, how we grow it. So when these two companies came together, they were the pink and the green, and they believed strongly in what they brought together. And originally, if I had not done the intervention, they would have talked to each other about their ideas, holding to their ideas, valuing their ideas. And what happened, as I look back on it, we sort of created a container in the middle. And what I had them doing was putting their ideas into the container of what's possible to make this relationship work. And as they put their ideas into the container, there was a shift in their awareness from us and them to we and the customers. And what happened is they put their ideas together, and in Spanish they call it el miollo, is that these ideas connected, and the collective wit, the collective intelligence of the two organizations came into play. And what rose to the top was really a new figure. And it has some of the green, it has some of the pink, but it was a whole new configuration about how they're going to work together. So the two concepts I would especially want to express around what happened is one is a collaborative awareness, a mindset of collaboration rather than a mindset of telling, changing, or fighting for your position. And I think the other, and I don't know which among mine to emphasize, is the collective intelligence. It's that realizing if we can put our heads together, we come up with a better picture. So I'm going to stop there, as that is my input for now.
Thank you, Frances. Appreciate that. I'm going to toss it over to Yeshim to introduce Hilary.
Great, thank you, Theo. And thank you, Frances. Amazing share. So yeah, now it's my pleasure now to introduce Hilary. When I looked up a bit, I haven't met Hilary before. When I looked up what she was doing, I saw how her own research is about personal integration as a key for advancing human capacity for collaborative organization. I mean, for me, I'm in conflict resolution. I will speak as a third speaker, but for me, this is the key in my own work. So I'm really excited to get to know and to introduce Hilary, but just a little bit more about her. She's a scholar practitioner focused on the human and organizational dimensions of creating healthy communities, which is so beautiful. And after a successful academic career in the US, Hilary repatriated to Ireland last November, and she's there now. Hilary leads a global NGO called Action Research Plus Foundation, which I suggest all of you have a look. It's amazing. The work that they do is amazing. This foundation gathers action researchers in doing so-called inner work in response to external crisis of everything. I mean, that is the bottom line of my work too. So her work has always been about sustainable development, and now more than ever. Her latest book, How to Do Action Research Transformation, is now published. So over to you, Hilary, and I'm really excited to be listening to you.
Thanks very much for that generous introduction. I look forward to what you have to say too. Maybe piggybacking a little bit on the mindset issue that Frances brought to us. I have been pondering more and writing indeed today that our conceptualization of change, especially in the action research world, I can critique that perhaps more easily, but I think just in change generally, we lack a psychological component. It seems to me our model of psychology is not quite up to speed. What do I mean by that? It means, you know, if we imagine that bowl in the space between us that Frances was putting, not only are we creating something together, but there's something already in the bowl. And sometimes we disavow that, we deny it, right? So there's these other things, these kind of invisible things that are there. And what is invisible, you know, like with icebergs, like with planet Earth itself, the soil, what is invisible or under the ground can often be and is often be the place that life comes from. So maybe a quick story just from this week. I was invited, you know, I'm trying to get into new conversations, new communities in Ireland. I'm very passionate about sustainable development. And I was invited, thankfully, by a rather patrician gentleman. So he's very tall. We call them West Brits here in Ireland. In other words, they seem rather British, which is problematic for Irish people, by the way. And as I was listening to his concerns about climate change, I started a little bit in my mind thinking, what's being denied, what's being disavowed, how do I serve to bring that forward also with myself? So I shared a little tiny bit about my own eco-anxiety, which, by the way, blipped up into eco-terror over the summer. I was reading about the Atlantic stream possibly flipping as early as 2025. Even as I say that, I can feel I'm a little scared. And in that invitation from me to him, this West Brit, began to speak of his own despair. And he had been a physician his whole life, just recently retired. And I asked him about his children, and I won't get into the whole story, but anyway, it created this lovely space between us as we were moving into this meeting. And people reported, it was my first meeting, people reported that something new was happening in that meeting, because all of a sudden we were all speaking a little bit more personally, which perhaps in Ireland, perhaps everywhere, is a little odd. We tend to talk about things like they're out there rather than also in here. So you know, it's just like a simple example of working the inner such that it's connected with the outer. And I'm reminded of that lovely phrase from Paulo Freire, one of my great role models. We can't get there from there, right? From talking about it like it's out there. We can't get there from there. We get there from here. So this here for me is this kind of it's not just an internal space, because internal is always connected to external, but a little bit, what am I disavowing? What am I denying? So maybe that's what I throw into the space, along with one other idea that I developed in my last book that I've become rather passionate about, and it's very much in operation in our action research plus foundation, is that of developmental friendship, right? So how I invite myself or others into what is it that I've been disavowing requires, I guess, empathy, that word, but I like this notion of friendship where we're developing with one another. Development meaning literally, there's certain practices, we could talk a while about this another time, but my growing my own with others ability, and them with me, to hold more complexity, to hold more pace, like life has gotten fast, hold more space for one another, complexity. So mindsets, being able to take one another's perspectives without giving up my own power. So in the end, maybe the bottom line is bringing power and love together as we grow one another in developmental friendship at this time of, let's just call it the crisis of everything. Like, yeah. So let me leave it on that happy note. Thank you. And over to Theo and then to Yeshim. Thank you.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yes, Francis, back to you actually to introduce Yeshim.
Yes, thank you, Hilary, for that. So I would like to introduce Yeshim. She is a specialist in conflict resolution. This is a shift conceptually from talking about collaboration under certain circumstances to talking about collaboration in conflict. So she's a specialist in conflict resolution and negotiation, and what she brings to these settings is she's bringing dialogue, communication, and resilience into situations where there are not only differences, but there are extremists. I'm so impressed with that and the platforms on which she works, because for over 15 years, she works with politicians, business leaders, youth, women, and societal groups in conflict. She said that the groups that she works with are often reluctant to dialogue, which is not starting from an even place. They're already reluctant to dialogue and also have polarizing views. So today she provides training and consultancies to several UN agencies, governmental organizations, corporate sectors worldwide on both change management and conflict resolution. One of the things that impressed me in looking at Yeshim's profile is that on these high platforms, she not only works there, sometimes she actually initiated these platforms. So let me introduce Yeshim. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis, for introducing me, and thank you, Theo, for sharing this. Hello, everyone, and good evening, good morning, good afternoon. We're all in different parts of the world. I'm joining you from London, and it's lovely to be here. I loved hearing what Francis and Hilary said, and I would like to perhaps build on it from a conflict perspective. What stood out for me was Francis talking about the importance of the mindset. Do we have a collaborative mindset or a fighting mindset? And then Hilary talked about the change from inner to outer, and these two are the foundations of my work. So I want to now talk about my work a little bit, but just a little background. I was brought up in a country with a lot of tension, especially in my teenage years. I was in a country with civil unrest. So we were in and out of lockdown. Life really was not easy. A lot of the things that normal teenagers enjoyed, I didn't really have a chance to enjoy. And everything from life to schools, from shopping to work, like everything was impacted. Imagine a life of in and out of lockdowns. Sorry, I just put my clock as well so that I don't exceed my time. So later on in life, I decided to understand what I was brought up with a bit more closely. I really needed to do that for my own personal development. And then I was so much interested in that, I decided to choose this as a profession and ended up being specialized in conflict resolution and change processes. It's 15 years ago now. So having engaged with people in complex disputes on the ground, because I do two things. I do consultancy as in on the ground to work people, often in war-torn countries, but not necessarily as other places too. I also do training, and having done 15 years of experience later in places, from Northern Ireland to South Africa to Cyprus, Colombia, Lebanon, Bosnia, and a few other places, I have learned 3 valuable and quite surprising lessons. And this is what I want to share today. So lesson 1 is conflict is actually good for us if well handled and resolved well. Lesson number 2, a well-handled conflict leaves us in a better place than even ever before. And 3, a well-handled conflict can benefit individuals, communities, and organizations, including private sector, NGOs, and other groups. So this is what I'm going to talk about. Having said all of this, yet we always perceive conflict as a negative thing. I now want to share a couple of photographs. Let me see. Can you see it? Can you see? Great. Okay. So I often, I show these photographs in a lot of my sessions and ask which one they associate conflict with. And more often than not, people say the one on the left. But actually, if I tell you that the one on the left, the one on the left is taken in the buffer zone in the island of Cyprus, which is the south of Turkey in the Mediterranean Sea. It's a conflict-torn place. It's still divided by a Berlin-style wall. And actually, the first picture is taken from where it's divided. And actually, life is pretty, you don't feel, it's just very peaceful at the moment because there is no fighting going on. But if you look at the second photo, which people think is much less conflictual than the other one, this is taken in one of our sessions. I was involved in I led a project in 2014, which brought 2 groups of people who've never been brought together. And the second photo is actually in the middle of a big tension. So we have these perceptions. And if I actually then put my own conclusion on it, the first one, they're both conflict. First one is poorly handled and second one is well handled. So the answer is both. Again, if I show you these photographs, which one would you associate with conflict? People say on the left. And not the right, whereas actually the right one, these are the leaders of the Cypriot community. They look very happy, but actually this was followed by a massive big disagreement afterwards. So it's very difficult to do to our naked eye. It's really difficult to see. So again, poorly handled conflict, well handled conflict at the time, but things change. So answer can be both. And just a couple of more photographs just to give you how the island is divided. This is the refugee UNHCR tent, and all the areas are in the barbed wire. In fact, the building we met was behind one of those buildings. So I will now stop the share. And what I want to say is this. In my view, having seen all of this, a well-handled conflict is actually good for us. But how is it good for us? First of all, it can be a catalyst of change. In this project and many other projects I was involved, after if the conflict was well handled, relationships shifted immensely from bad to good and sometimes better. And for example, the communities we brought together in 2014 are still talking together, and they are cooperating with all sorts of little community projects and other things, although the island is still divided. A well-handled conflict stimulates creativity because it takes us out of ourselves. We have to push ourselves to think differently. A well-handled conflict increases engagement, because sometimes when we're too comfortable, we don't want to engage. But when it is uncomfortable, we force ourselves. A well-handled conflict can foster critical evaluation. It takes us see things differently. Certainly opens deeper understanding, because we see the other person in a much more vulnerable place. And just referring to what Hilary was saying earlier on, inner to outer vulnerability is where the growth happens, in my mind. Anyway, certainly in my personal life, it was like that. And then my last point is that a well-handled conflict in organizations can increase effectiveness as a result of all of the above. And therefore, potentially, I argue that it boosts profitability in corporate organizations. So these are, in my mind, these are the benefits of a well-handled conflict. Then you might now ask, what is well-handled? What do we mean by well-handled? What are the features of well-handled conflict? First of all, I would say I'll just make 3 points. One is a well-handled conflict is a well-mapped conflict. It doesn't matter it's between a husband and a wife, or in a family household, or an organization, or between nations, or in a corporate sector, whichever sector. The first thing is to map it well. Who are the actors? What are the interactions? What are the motives? What the issues are? The second one is that it needs sustainability, which means that it needs long-term thinking and getting the timing right. For us to put these two groups together took 18 months of shuttle diplomacy. So it can take a lot of time, depending on the context, of course. And my final point is that a well-handled conflict resolves with collaboration. And therefore, it is engaging, it is open to listen and hear. How many times that we make a point to someone and they listen and they respond, and you just think, did this person actually hear me? We don't even know. There are a lot of problems happen just because of simple dialogue, lack of skills of dialogue. So a collaborative process means good dialogue, inclusivity, openness, and transparency. So I'll just leave it there. My conclusion: conflict is good for you because it transforms relationships. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So the invitation is that we're going to invite you to have some conversation in smaller groups. We're going to put you into groups of 3s and 4s and 5s, depending on how it shakes out here. I'm going to let the Zoom algorithm do its thing to pair you up with some conversation partners, and just invite you to share what are your reactions, what have you heard, and what questions do you have. And you'll have just about 7 or so minutes. We'll come back around 3. Different time zones, so about 38 or so. And then we'll just open up the floor and ask questions, and I look forward to the interplay between our 3 wonderful panelists. So about 7 minutes of conversation. What did you hear? What reactions do you have? And what questions do you bring? Christopher and Miguel and Lisa, you should all have an invitation to... Rosa, do you have an invitation to join, or?
I'm not seeing an invitation to join.
Maybe you wanted to stick around with this group, huh?
Either way, wherever you want to put me, Theo, is fine.
I'll ask our 3 panelists, were you hoping to have conversation or talk to one another? We can do this either which way.
It can include verbal, Rosa. I was hoping we'd have some common conversation just about the commonalities that.
Yeah. So Rosa, you know what? I'm just going to keep you here, if that's okay, and you can listen in on this end. I have one. Oh, okay. It was one person that was popping in the left. So yeah, I'm going to set my timer to make sure that I bring folks back at an appropriate time. The breakout room's all yours, ladies.
Rosa was going to be part of this panel originally, so it's like the universe has
I
demanded
know,
to be
I
here.
know.
Yes, no, I guess exactly.
I often talk about the spiritual dimensions of our work.
Yeah.
That it's very much a factor, you know. But I am just so pleased that we did this together. Thank you, Theo. You just did a great job of bringing us together. I'm just amazed at the threads. I'm amazed at the threads that go between what we talked about.
I loved how Yeshim brought it, how you started by building on mindset and whatever. But I was left with the somewhat unusual thing for OD people to say, that not only is conflict good, but perhaps even necessary, actually, for any kind of transformation to happen. There can be internal conflict, we could call it, or interpersonal, or conflict, war with Mother Earth. Yeah.
Well, I really like that, because in my Gestalt work, we talk about contact. And contact is where people meet at their boundaries. And that's what conflict allows you to do. You meet at the boundaries, and handling it well mean you're willing to be influenced when you do make that contact, that moment that I talked about, when you're no longer us and them, but it's a we and what's possible. That allows for the handling it well part that I think she talked about. But yes, conflict in Gestalt conflicts is useful because it helps people to meet at their boundaries where they're truly going to change or learn.
There is no contact without interruption. I remember learning that in a Gestalt workshop in Cleveland.
That's right.
John the Brilliant, whose name
John Carter?
Yes.
Oh,
John
he's my teacher and my friend.
Yes, he was so brilliant, had such a profound, he really touched me that I remember this sentence years later, right?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I want to say that I found a really interesting creative tension / paradox between what you were able to accomplish in a half day, Francis, and then Yeshim's point that often, you know, there's an investment of time involved, and that we need to be thinking in an arc of a longer process. I think both are true depending on the circumstance. And so I just want to pull out that creative tension / paradox there.
You know, and that's one of the parallels between working from a Gestalt orientation and Gestalt therapy. Gestalt therapy is short because it tries to find out what's the key issue, what's the burning issue that needs to be addressed. And the burning issue here was just different cultures, just different realities. And so instead of whatever, all those long talks of talking against each other, I was recognized that what they needed was to see each other, and that would help them to change. So it doesn't always work that way, but in this case, it did.
Yeah, and I imagine you also had the opportunity to learn a little bit about each of them beforehand. You weren't walking into the situation cold, right?
No, I really went to those companies. I went to their sites to look at what their worlds were like. Yeah, because I was internal.
Right.
I have one person in the waiting room that some of us know well. I'm gonna bring him in real quick and send him to a breakout. So
Maybe there's a way to resolve the dilemma. It just flashes in my mind, because the example I gave was like literally like a 2-3 minute conversation that had quite an impact. But I do think what we all have in common is there's an intention, be it explicit or implicit, for longevity, for hanging in there. And you know, my notion of developmental friendship, even if this is a momentary thing, but I've committed my life to developing. So the longevity thing, I think, is actually very important, but maybe we don't have to measure it in time blocks per se. I'm not sure.
Well, it's really interesting that you say that, Hilary, because the story that you shared actually was this momentary encounter and how much is possible then. And Frances brought up spirituality. So I just want to say that a metaphor that's been really important to me is like in Zen Buddhism, people talk about the possibility of awakening in each moment. And in Tibetan Buddhism, we talk about like the long arc of development, right? Like developmental friendships, etc. And they're both true, right? There's that possibility that something can happen in the moment, which allows for an awakening. And in order for the awakening to be stable, to be cultivated, to be grounded, it needs to be something that we develop over time as well.
And that's why a shift in mindset, if you can accomplish that at all, is so important, because they lead with the mindset. So in the example I gave, they went from thinking about the parts to the whole, and then the relation between the parts. So that's a whole different mindset than even thinking about the whole. What's the relationship between the parts, and how can you establish something that's going to be sustainable? So anyway, I'm talking too much.
Yeshim, we've not heard from you.
I'm listening to you. I was actually thinking how what you say, what we all talk about applies to groups, but also internally as well. And I don't know about you, but I sometimes feel that there is a group of two polarized groups in my head sometimes when I can't decide about something, I'm conflicted about something. And when I was hearing about the collaboration and a collaborative mind rather than a fighting mind, and sometimes when I'm conflicted inside, I have a fighting mind. And how inner, as Hilary, what you were saying, so how it starts from inner to outer is what really strikes me. And I have to say, in the learnings that I had in my work really changed, impacted me personally as well in the last 15 years, how I see people, how I see myself. And in fact, I would even go as far as saying that some of the things that you are talking about, I wonder whether that can actually be implemented to how we change internally too, how the group dynamics affect, or we can handle our situations with that mind too. So that's what I was thinking, hearing all of you speak.
We have folks coming back.
Oh, people are coming
Hilary, I
back.
didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah, we have folks coming back, and everybody should be back here in about another 5 or 6 seconds.
Super.
All right. So welcome back, everyone. I hope that you had some meaningful conversation. I'm going to spotlight our panelists and invite anyone from any of the breakout groups to share what reactions do you have, what questions do you bring.
Well, Ty in our group had the last 24 seconds to toss in another thing into Frances's bowl, and she brought up the point of the power that comes at us as we're trying to be change agents, and how it feels. It's like having a strong wind of, you can't say this, you can't do this, we won't allow it coming at you, when you know that there's a rainbow out there someplace. And how do you handle that force, that resistant force, which something Kurt Lewin started telling us about a long while ago, but it's still out there. I mean, and all three of you are in the midst of it. I'm here sheltered away from it myself in my own little room, but Hilary, what about you? Power play.
I want to show you a rainbow.
Please.
I have, Ireland has a lot of
Yes.
rainbows, so there's one recently.
I knew it was out there.
Out there with gold at the end.
Mm-hmm.
piggybacking on the conversation we were having, so I'll say just this, the idea that conflict is not only good but necessary. And you know, the nuance is, I think all of us are becoming aware of how the status quo is virtually immovable around climate change issues. There's like sleepwalking, not least because our fossil fuel lifestyle is very, very difficult to transition from, and the power money that's been centralized in that. So let me just throw that into the conversation. It's not like there's not an awareness of that. Yeah.
You know, that question reminds me of one of our teachers. Some of you would recognize, if I could think of Joseph Luft, who was part of the Johari window. And he raised the question, he did a session in the wee hours of the morning one morning. And the session was, what do you do when you don't know what to do? Mm-hmm. And what I liked about that question in that session is, Hilary, as you described the larger societal big issues, it leaves me with that feeling of what to do when you don't know what to do. And for me, working in my small place to do what I can, it's the only answer that I have, and helping to bring reality back. Someone was talking the other day about people who are dark and they're difficult to work with, etc. And I asked a simple question, said, and forgive me, I said, have you ever gotten an SOB behind closed doors where you can see the person? You know, because behind every difficult situation, there's some humanity somewhere, and we're trying to get to it.
Yeah.
What other resonance or questions do you bring?
People are shy.
Well,
maybe people have observations.
I'll jump in, I guess, for our group. Good morning. Well, at least from here. Essentially, I think our group jumped right in on conflict, since maybe Yeshim, your timing of being at the end, but we just each described where we experience conflict in our day-to-day or work, and then started talking about some of the things. And Yeshim, I've been lucky enough to be in a couple of your other sessions with us, and just talk about, I think at one point you had shown like a curve of the conflict, as far as like where we start, and then when we get to a point of both sides hurting enough to make a change, that kind of thing. And then cross that over with another concept, which you had talked about, having almost like a conflict mentor that they've made it through. I think an example once was the couples thing, and if there's a couple that was successful, how they can influence the one that's in the middle of it, kind of thing. And so between the two, my brain was just thinking, if I get someone at that hurting stage and then we can resolve it, can that person or group or whatever be then a mentor to the next one coming through, kind of threading the two together. So that was kind of the end of our conversation as we were being ushered out. I just love those two concepts from some of the prior stuff that Yeshim's been involved in. So thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Interesting that there's always something that people relate to personally, and observing others. So it applies. We were just, when you were all in the breakout rooms, I was talking about how sometimes the outer the principles and the lessons from outer conflicts can actually help inner turmoils as well. We can have two conflicting sides inside of us too, and as Francis was saying, sometimes they have a collaborative mind, sometimes not. Sometimes we fight with ourselves, and it's amazing how systems duplicate themselves, and how systems from between two people to between two nations we all have shared the same DNA, so sometimes systems also are similar to, regardless of the scale. And the hurt, you're talking about the hurting stalemate, people only resolve something when they're really, really, really stuck, internationally or personally. But yes, thank you for mentioning that.
I'll contribute. I was saying that we often bring baggage from our early life. And I was sharing about my brother and how terrible he always was growing up to me. And I became the yes person, right? I became the buffer and the person who was the peacemaker, and early in life, right? And I learned that was not serving me. And so I had to educate myself on conflict resolution so that I wasn't just saying, yes, okay, yes, let's have peace, right? Because sometimes peace is pushing it under the rug, and then it's going to erupt bigger later.
I would say always. I would say sometimes always.
Yeah.
You know, Gandhi said peace is not the absence of conflict, but to know how to deal with it, or deal with it well. I'm paraphrasing it, but I really believe that. You see these amazing happy couples with loads of unspoken tension underneath in organizations too. So yeah, the more open, the better.
Yep.
I think it speaks to this, what's the psychological model we have when we're working? And thanks for sharing your own journey where you've revisited childhood. I think that's absolutely key, and perhaps all of us actually need to do that work and hang out with those stories, what we have embodied, because otherwise we're just layering over our nice ideas, but we've embodied and then often disavowed and denied. In your case, your no; for others, their yes. And so the opportunity of conflict or of climate change or whatever is also to bring the gift to this younger self to grow up, to mature.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think
I've been looking at the work that you three do, and so many others who walk into a dysfunctioning, conflicted a group of people who want to move ahead, but they don't. And the image I just had is you don't, in order to do that work, you don't come in armed to the teeth, with a shield and everything else. You literally have to lay down all your own armament and your own baggage and just walk in there as a unguarded human in order to demonstrate to people you can open up. I'm open, let's open. But of course, you might leave a couple of things outside the door in case you need to grab them, but otherwise it's pretty much a cappella, and you're right, and you're quite vulnerable. Or am I just exaggerating? Frances, what do you think? Because you've been in a few lion's dens in your life.
I have, and a lot of what I learned, I look at in retrospect. But someone on the panel just talked about how she is changed by having these experiences and what we learn from these experiences. So, in response, I would say, Dave, that when we have an experience and either learn from the failure or success of it, there's something we embody from that lesson that becomes a part of us. So when I walk in the room, in some ways, I'm representing so much of the history I've had of successes and failures and all of that keeps me centered. So I'm not going to be thrown off by a conflict because I've seen bigger. And I'm not going to be thrown off by what someone just put in their posts, when someone's saying everything is nice, because I've seen the cover up. But the point is that we embody what we learn, and in the next step, we take that with us in the way that we think and the way we behave.
Thanks. That was great.
I have a question about practicalities. So as a practitioner, and with what I've been hearing today, I'm wondering, how do you embody that in the room when somebody that you're dealing with is trying to play the peacemaker?
So would you like me to answer, Nicole? Yeah, thank you. No, thank you. That's a really good question. Being a conflict mediator needs a lot of tough love. I would call tough love. You know, we don't put people in the same room without any preparation, and the preparation includes the absolute timelines, like, for example, we decide which words they should be using and which words they won't be using, because sometimes even terminology upset other people. And there is the two groups before getting together need to sign up to an agreement that they develop over time. So it's not an agreement that I put in front of them, but they develop it themselves. And then with shuttle diplomacy, you go back and forth between the group, and until they both agree the same protocol, we don't sit in the same room. And when we sit in the same room, if somebody is deliberately trying to either slow down or sometimes being offensive, you know, sometimes because these are very heightened, you know, situations, then we have to be very, very tough on that, polite, but very tough. So people think peace as a soft, gentle thing. Peace is a very hard thing. Peace needs a lot of toughness, resilience, strength, and firmness, discipline. People don't think it that way, but this is what my experience is. I hope I answered your question.
Wow.
I was saying the same thing, Dave. Aaron, I know you were in the room with Ken, so I know you had some good questions and conversation. Ken or Aaron or anybody else? Do you have another thought for us that you want to share?
I will happily defer to Ken if he wishes to speak on behalf of our group.
I can summarize well about the talking in our breakout session. We, from my eyes, we have been looking for good means to look at the conversation and dialogue in the panelists, but the conversation but seems to be go back and forth between practical sense, abstract sense. So that was a conversation in a breakout room. Please support my to handle some summary.
Did you have a specific question, Ken, that you wanted to ask? I heard you say that you talked about practical things as well as the more abstract. Is that correct?
Yeah, I feel so. We look at the abstract sense. What is the structure of a collaborative with creating a collaborative wisdom, or what is holding spaces between the participants in a conversation or actual research process, and also what is the good catalyst of a conflict resolution process. And also, so we talk about what is the differences in process and the content in the conversation of three panelists. That's the idea of our conversation.
Thank you, Ken. Yeah, that word catalyst resounds for me in you know, having had a hand in bringing our panel together, it felt like there was some sort of catalyst that said, hey, here are some folks that have some intersection that could inform how we think about synergy and collaboration. So I'm grateful you're bringing that up, and I think that is a curiosity. I wonder if any of our panelists have a thought on what's a catalyst toward collaboration and synergy that we maybe can walk away with, because we're just about at the top of the hour and need to wrap this conversation. I want to briefly just say thank you to everyone who's here. We are going to share this recording, and I look forward to have further conversations with these three amazing thought leaders. But yeah, maybe as a wrap up, as we leave, is there a catalyst that you want to suggest we consider in bringing people into collaboration and synergy?
I was catalyzed by Dave Farron's opening question, which I artfully kicked down the road. But I want you to know that I think it's the unanswerable question of all questions. How do we actually engage with the fearsome status quo powers that surround us? And I think we've heard some beautiful ideas from Francis and Yeshim, but that is a question very dear to my heart. Thank you.
That's a great point, Hilary. I would say the catalyst for collaboration is to take the othering out of it, the shame element out of situations by being open and inclusive to start.
Well, I would echo both of those. And I think in a way we become catalytic in the way that we work. But I think what motivates me, even in the face of power, is my belief in the human spirit. It just seems to transcend everything. My belief in the Holy Spirit, that's true. But the human spirit seems to transcend everything. And once you are surprised by that or pleased by that, it helps us in those situations to just feel like every human being that's involved in this is important, has something valuable to say. There's in that container, that space between us is where the human spirit meets to do the work.
I like that.
Beautiful.
I think we'll leave it at that for today. Please do be on the lookout for a next invitation. We'll share with those of you that will hear this recording, and my gratitude to Yeshim and Hilary and Francis and all the rest of you that were here. Thank you for this conversation. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Theo, for pulling all of this together. It's a lot of work, and it's a great benefit for your effort.
Thank you, Dave. Have a wonderful day.